Welcome to Life Stories, where the woman they called a burden became the voice millions didn't know they needed. She was invited home for Thanksgiving, but only for 2 nights, like a guest, not family. What happens when a lifetime of quiet sacrifice meets the terrifying freedom of finally saying no? This is not a story about growing old. It's a story about what happens after they stop seeing you. After the casseroles, the thank yous, the well-meaning neglect. After the silence becomes too loud to ignore. And it all starts with a suitcase, a bus ticket, and a needle. Stay with us, because by the time this story ends, you might find yourself questioning what it really means to be needed, and what it means to finally be seen. Let's begin. The scent of cinnamon and bleach hit Eleanor first, a strange mix of memory and maintenance. David's SUV still rumbled in the driveway, a whimper of an engine that had seen better years, but she didn't need to turn around. She knew he wouldn't help with the bag. He never did. She stood on the welcome mat of her son's home in suburban Connecticut, cardigan too thin for November, peach jam jars clinking in her tote like glass hearts. In her other hand, a turkey-shaped ornament made from old flannel and mismatched buttons. She had stitched it with quiet care, not expecting thanks. But a child's smile, maybe. That would have been enough. Rachel opened the door with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Hi, Eleanor, you're early." The traffic was light. "The guest room's ready. It's just for 2 nights, right?" Eleanor stepped inside. The hardwood gleamed, too clean, like no one had really lived here. Cinnamon candles battled the antiseptic tang of floor polish. From the couch, Noah, 12 now and lanky, sprang forward and hugged her waist. "Grandma!" His warmth was real. That, at least, had not changed. Not yet. At the dinner table, the turkey was perfectly bronzed. There were 3 types of pie, all store-bought, each slice laid out like a lifestyle blog post. David talked about the city's zoning laws. Rachel corrected his grammar between wine sips. Eleanor helped Noah cut his meat and listened to his jokes, chuckling in the right places. Until he asked too casually, "Grandma, when are you leaving?" The table paused. "Tomorrow," she answered quietly. Rachel kept slicing sweet potatoes. "We only prepped the guest room for 2 nights," she murmured, eyes still on her work. "Tight week before the holidays." Eleanor's fork froze. David took a long sip from his wine glass and said nothing. That night, no one stopped her from doing the dishes. No one offered to help. She stood on tiptoe to reach the upper cabinets, hands stinging from the hot water. Through the window, moonlight spilled over the sink, turning the faucet silver. In the background, she heard Rachel talking in the same tone she used for conference calls. "I reorganized the kitchen storage again. She kept putting things in the wrong place." David didn't respond. Eleanor stood still, clutching a plate. Something hollow echoed in her ribs, as though she just heard her own name read off a list of things to be archived. A few minutes later, Rachel walked in, placed a sealed container by the sink. "Low sodium, for you." Low sodium. Like her. Safe, muted, easy to manage. Later, when the house fell quiet, Eleanor sat alone on the edge of the fold-out cot downstairs. The guest room, apparently, had been given over to holiday decorations. The cot smelled faintly of plastic and neglect. She looked at her hands. The veins, like blue rivers under fragile bark. These hands had once built a life. Now they packed a bag and knew when to leave. At 5 a.m., dressed, shoes on, she waited by the door, peach jam tucked away. David came downstairs, surprised. "You're not staying for breakfast?" Eleanor smiled gently. "Didn't you say the schedule's tight?" The ride back was silent, save for the radio. When they reached Willow Creek Assisted Living, the sliding doors opened with a tired whir. Doris at the front desk offered her the same pale smile she always did. "Back already, Mrs. Whitmore?" Eleanor nodded. She returned to her room. The Halloween sticker Noah had put up still clung to the door. A cartoon bat in a witch hat. Inside, the beige curtains hung limp. Her alarm clock had stopped ticking 2 weeks ago. She never replaced the battery. That night, she sat by the window. Outside, everything was still. The stars had retreated behind a curtain of clouds. In the silence, she pulled out Noah's turkey painting, a construction paper cutout with fingerprint flames. She had no idea that by the end of that month, that piece of paper would become the seed of everything that came next. 3 days later, a call came. It was Joan. "I heard you used to sew." Eleanor hadn't told anyone. Not here. Maybe. "There's a woman's club in Maplefield. Nothing fancy. Just needles and thread. We meet Tuesdays." "I'm not sure." Joan cut her off. "You're not dead yet. That's reason enough." That Tuesday, Eleanor stood at the bus stop, her sewing kit zipped inside a grocery bag. No destination in mind. Just one need. She couldn't keep doing nothing and calling it living. When she arrived, the community center was little more than a brick box, but inside it buzzed with the low hum of conversation and quiet industry. Joan was there, silver hair tied back in a scrunchie, eyes like flint. "You came." Eleanor nodded. They stitched in silence. Joan didn't ask questions, didn't offer sympathy, only fabric. "You're good," she finally said, squinting at Eleanor's seams. "Used to work textiles, before life got repurposed. You should sell these." Eleanor laughed. "No one buys old lady scraps." Joan grinned. "Let me introduce you to someone." The next day, Joan returned with her granddaughter Zoe, a wiry 20-something in a denim jacket littered with enamel pins. "You're Maggie?" Zoe asked. "Eleanor." Zoe smiled. "Let's make you famous." Eleanor stared at her, confused. Zoe pulled out her phone. "TikTok, Etsy. We'll call it Granny's Hands." Eleanor nearly said no, but something in Zoe's voice, the ease, the certainty, felt like permission. Not to be young again, just to be seen. So she stitched, and within a week, Eleanor Whitmore went viral. But the real twist came not from the internet, not even from the first sale. It came from the phone ringing one quiet afternoon. David's number. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Mom," he said. His voice was tight, worn. "We need to talk." Do you think Eleanor owes her family another chance after everything? Have you ever felt like you were only invited because it was expected, not because you were wanted? Because the next thing David says will change Eleanor's journey and challenge the independence she just began to taste. Continue in part 2. "Mom, we need to talk." Eleanor stood frozen, the soft whir of the motel air conditioner suddenly too loud in the room. She'd been stitching a new pouch, navy cotton, sturdy lining, when the phone buzzed with David's name. The thread still looped through her fingers, hanging mid-air like a breath that couldn't decide whether to exhale. "We've run into a situation," he continued, his voice oddly polite, like he was negotiating with a stranger. Eleanor didn't respond. She let the silence do the heavy lifting. "Things at work aren't good. There've been layoffs. Jenna's business hasn't recovered from the downturn. The mortgage is tight." She closed her eyes. "And Noah's got tutoring and extracurriculars and, well, we're stretched. I know it's a lot to ask, but if you still have some of that retirement money." "David," she said softly, almost a whisper, "you don't need a mother, you need a loan." There was a beat of stunned quiet on the other end. Then, "That's not fair." "No," Eleanor said. "What's not fair is being remembered only when your account runs dry." His voice tightened. "We're family." A small, brittle laugh escaped her. "Are we?" He started to respond, but she ended the call before he could. The screen went dark, and in the silence that followed, Eleanor stared at the unfinished pouch in her lap. The needle had slipped, the last stitch uneven. She didn't fix it. That evening, she sat outside the motel on the narrow concrete step, knees tucked to her chest, watching the traffic blur by in streaks of red and white. Her fingers itched for motion, for fabric, for purpose, but the weight in her chest anchored her still. She had done everything right. She had followed the rules, raised a child alone after her husband's cancer, worked double shifts, canceled vacations, saved grocery coupons, never bought herself the nicer sweater, always baked from scratch. She had done it all so David would have a life she never did. And now all she had was a voice on the phone asking for her savings like it was still his birthright. The door behind her creaked open. Joan appeared, a styrofoam cup of motel coffee in one hand, 2 spoons sticking out. "You look like hell," she said cheerfully, settling beside her. "Want to talk about it?" "No," Eleanor muttered. "Perfect. I hate feelings anyway." She handed her the cup. "Drink." They sat there for a long moment, sipping something that vaguely resembled coffee. Joan didn't press, didn't pity, just stayed. Finally, Eleanor whispered, "He only calls when he needs something." Joan didn't look surprised. Kids do that. So do siblings, and ex-husbands, and landlords. "He asked for my savings." Joan whistled low, bold, and I almost said yes. Why? Because I thought that was what mothers do. Joan looked at her then, really looked. "No, that's what martyrs do, and martyrdom's lonely as hell." Eleanor dropped her gaze. "I feel like if I don't help, I'm failing him." "No," Joan said gently. "If you do help, you're failing you." The next morning, Eleanor skipped her usual stitching hour and walked to the small-town bank. She printed her balance, $14,282.57. Not enough to save anyone's mortgage, but enough to start over, if she chose to. She didn't touch it. Back at the community center, Zoe was already there, bouncing on her heels with a look Eleanor had come to recognize, excitement laced with a hint of chaos. "You won't believe it," Zoe blurted. "We got a message from a major art collective in Oregon. They want to feature you." Eleanor blinked. "Me?" "They're doing a profile series called Makers After Midnight, artists who found their voice later in life. They want a full story, photos, interview, maybe even a little documentary." "A documentary?" "You'll be on camera." Eleanor took a step back. I don't want to be a spectacle." Zoe reached for her hand. "You're not. You're a story. And people need stories like yours. Women need stories like yours." Eleanor didn't answer. She wasn't ready. Not yet. But the seed had been planted. Later that week, she found herself at the kitchen table of the community center, alone, after hours. Everyone had gone home, even Joan. The overhead lights buzzed softly, casting long shadows over the piles of fabric. She pulled out the pouch she hadn't finished, the one with the uneven stitch. Slowly, she unthreaded the last loop and redid it. Clean, straight, precise. The door creaked open. She looked up, expecting Joan. It was David. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed red. "I called the nursing home," he said quietly. "They said you hadn't been back." She didn't reply. "I thought maybe you were in trouble." Eleanor set down her needle. "Why would you think that?" "Because I didn't believe you could leave without us." She tilted her head. "But I did." He walked closer, stopped just short of the table. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said. "I came to apologize." She waited. "I didn't see you," he said. "Not really. I think I got used to you just being there, reliable, quiet, giving." He looked at the pouches laid out in front of her. "You made something," he whispered. "You built something new." Eleanor folded her hands. "You always said you'd move me out of that little town," she said. "Remember that?" He nodded. "I just didn't think it'd be into silence." He flinched. "I'm sorry." It was the first time she'd heard it from him without a catch, without a clause. And still, she didn't say it back. She simply said, "You can visit, but not to lean, only to learn." He nodded. "Okay." She stood, walked him to the door. They didn't hug, not yet, but as he stepped out, he turned. "Mom, I saw one of your pouches online. Someone said it reminded them of their grandmother, that they hadn't cried in months until they read your card." Eleanor blinked. "What card?" "The one that said, 'Yesterday I watched birds land on an empty bench. It reminded me I'm still here, still watching, still worth noticing.'" She hadn't remembered writing that, but maybe she had. Have you ever realized you were worth more than the role others assigned you? Because just as Eleanor begins to claim her space in the world, someone else steps into her past and threatens to pull her right back in. Don't miss what unfolds in part 3. It started with a knock. Not the soft kind. Not the polite kind either. It was sharp, purposeful. Eleanor looked up from her sewing table, the needle still threaded, paused mid-stitch. She opened the door of her small rental apartment, modest, warm, and finally hers, to find Rachel standing there. Not David. Rachel. Her coat was expensive. Her eyes were tired. "Can we talk?" she asked. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. Rachel didn't sit. She walked to the center of the room, arms crossed, like she couldn't decide whether she was a guest or an accuser. Eleanor remained still, waiting. "I heard David came to see you." "Yes," Rachel nodded. "He told me, and I'm glad. I am. But I need to be honest with you, Eleanor. Not as your daughter-in-law, just as a woman. Eleanor tilted her head. The air between them was stiff with unsaid things. I resented you, Rachel said. I thought you were always judging me. I thought you were inserting yourself into our life like you were, waiting for space to open up. I wasn't, Eleanor said gently. I was just trying not to vanish. Rachel looked at her, eyes softening just a hair. I didn't know that. A silence fell, not angry, just uncertain. Then Rachel sighed. I came here because I wanted to apologize for the two-night guest room, for the way we managed you, like logistics, not like a person. Eleanor nodded once. Thank you. Rachel's voice cracked. I also came because I found this. From her purse, she pulled out something Eleanor hadn't seen in months. A hand-drawn card, watercolor bleeding at the edges, the words slightly smudged. It was Noah's turkey drawing, the one Eleanor had folded and tucked away the day she left David's house. I didn't know he'd kept it, Rachel whispered. He put it in a drawer next to his trophies. I only found it when I was cleaning his room. On the back, he'd written, for Grandma who always listens. Eleanor took the paper in her hands, fingers trembling. Rachel took a breath. He misses you. Not out of guilt. Not because we told him to. But because you matter to him. You always have. It was too much. Eleanor sat down, heart thudding too fast. The paper felt warm in her hands, though it hadn't seen daylight in months. Then why didn't he call? She asked quietly. Why didn't he write? Rachel's shoulders sagged. Because he thought he hurt you. Because he saw what we didn't. He's a kid, but he's not blind. Eleanor nodded, slow. Her throat ached. She didn't want to cry, but something was breaking loose inside her, a kind of quiet thaw. I don't want to come back, she said. Not to be a fixture, or a babysitter, or an obligation. You shouldn't, Rachel said. But maybe you could come for dinner, just as you. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat in her chair, watching the sky lighten, watching as the street outside slowly came to life. By morning, she'd made a decision. She packed one pouch, a pale gold one, stitched with silver thread, and slipped the turkey drawing inside. She wrote a short note on a blank tag. Still listening, still here. And she mailed it to Noah. A week later, a letter arrived in return. It was scrawled in crooked lines, full of too many commas and misspellings, but it said what she needed to hear. Grandma, thank you for the pouch. My teacher said it's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. I told her you used to work in a factory, but now you're famous. I'm glad you didn't stay gone forever. Love, Noah. She held that letter to her chest and cried, not from pain, but because finally she had been seen, not for what she gave or what she endured, but for who she was. In the months that followed, Granny's hands continued to grow. Zoe helped her create a workshop series for women over 60. Hands that still remember. Joan co-led with her, of course, sharp-tongued as ever. One Saturday morning, while setting up for a session, Zoe turned to Eleanor with a strange look. I've got news. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Pregnant? Zoe snorted. No, but close. She held out her phone. The screen showed a major news outlet. Former factory worker turned artisan inspires generations with one needle and a stubborn spirit. A photo accompanied it. Eleanor, mid-stitch, eyes soft, hands steady. I didn't know they published it, Zoe whispered. I thought the pitch was rejected, but they loved your story. Eleanor read the headline again. Then again. Then she looked up. I was never just someone's mother. Zoe nodded. I know. That night, Eleanor sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the neighborhood settle into dusk. The wind moved through the trees like a hush. She thought about her life, the chapters where she was someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's helper, someone's afterthought, but not anymore. Now she was someone's inspiration. And maybe that was enough. She didn't know how many years she had left, but they were hers now, fully, undeniably. And one day, maybe long after she was gone, someone would find one of her pouches in a thrift store or a keepsake box. They'd run their fingers along the seams and wonder who had made it and why. And maybe, just maybe, they'd feel a little less invisible, a little more whole. Because stories don't end when a person is gone. They keep being carried by hands and threads and love stitched quiet and strong into the fabric of the world. What part of Eleanor's story resonated most with you? Comment 100 if you felt something from this journey. Where in the world are you watching from? Share this story with someone who needs to remember they still matter. Thank you for watching Life Stories.